we talk on the program a lot about calling Bible things by Bible names, and I find it intriguing because I've studied a lot about Catholicism and denominationalism, but my background is being brought up, and I consider it a blessing to be brought up in a Christian home by Bible-believing parents that took me to church. But one of the things we've talked about, I think, Troy, have we talked about this on the program of, or maybe it was somewhere else I was talking about it, but whether or not Christians that are brought up in the church always value what they have. I don't think it doesn't mean that you can't appreciate it, but I know so many people being brought up almost taking it for granted.
Yes.
Then I meet people like Joe that, you spend about 5 minutes in a room with them, you find out, well, you've dug and you studied, and you're very appreciative for where you are today. And I appreciate that a lot.
That tends to be a behavior you see a lot actually in the church, is those that were raised in the church and spent all their life in the church, that you don't see that depth of study. Often we talk about Jack Davis, and I'm going to embarrass him here, but Jack will tell you that, he was not a Christian, and he came into the church, and the reason he did is because of study. And you see that a lot with people that
I didn't realize that about Jack.
Yeah, and that's why he's such a student of the Bible, because he's like Joe. He wants to make sure that he's right and understands and making the right decisions. And I think that's valuable, and I think it's a wake-up call to a lot of Christians who've been in the church a long time to take it for granted. Because I know a lot of Christians who've been in the church their entire life, and they've never really just really studied the Bible. They get it in Bible classes, they get it in preaching and stuff like that. So they know the Bible, they just have never really studied it for themselves in depth.
And I can remember the time that I was actually immersed 2 different times. And I'm using the word immersion there in the pure sense of baptizo, because which time I was actually baptized for the remission of my sins, I'm not sure I can tell you. I don't remember the first time completely, but there's just a few thoughts that I had that kind of lingered in my mind that it was perhaps more because of my upbringing rather than the cognizant decision to be obedient to God and wash away my sins. So when I was a teenager, I remember studying and being convicted and saying, all right, and it was Gary Williams at East Main Church of Christ. I met him up there in the middle of the week, and he took me to the baptistry, and he immersed me. I know one of those times was for the right reasons, but I know for sure the second time was not because, well, Mom and Dad told me to or influenced me. It was because I had my own personal faith. And as I have studied more, it just gets reaffirmed to me.
Have you not ever talked about that as far as, I did not realize that about you, because I actually went through the same thing. I was baptized when I was 12 years old, and my dad is a preacher, and I remember when I was older, same thing. I went through the same thing. I thought, I was not baptized for the right reason. My dad even told me, "Oh, son, I know you were." I was like, "Well, Dad, but you're not in my brain. You weren't there to know what I was thinking." And I attribute that to what I call making the faith your own.
Oh, yes.
And I think that's going back to talking about members who grow up in the church. I think that's one of our biggest problems with our youth. Some of our youth that we're losing is that I just believe is because they've never really made the faith their own. It's just always been mom and dad's religion. It's always been what we've always done. That was kind of my attitude. And so I feel like I was influenced in that to be baptized. It wasn't until later I fell away from the church, lived a worldly life for many years. And then when I came back and studied my way back, I didn't want to come back to the Church of Christ just because that's what my family did. I wanted to be where
the Bible,
where this said I needed to be. I want to go to the church that I read about in here. And that's what led me back to the Church of Christ.